Charlotte Green, 27, stared at her parents' message glowing on her phone screen, tears streaming down her face. Either you help your brother pay his debt, or don't bother coming home for Thanksgiving. 15 years of sacrifices and saving for her dream business, gone with a single family demand. She never imagined her own parents would betray her this way, choosing her gambling-addicted brother over her future. What they didn't know, she had already set in motion a plan that would change the family dynamic forever. Hey everyone, before I dive deeper into probably the most painful family betrayal of my life, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever had to stand up against family pressure, hit that like button. Trust me, this story about standing your ground when family loyalty gets twisted is one wild ride. Subscribe to join me through this family revenge drama that I'm still processing. Now, let's get into how my entire world collapsed around me. From as far back as I can remember, the dynamic in our family was crystal clear. Ethan was the golden child and I was the responsible one expected to clean up his messes. Growing up in our modest suburban Boston home, I learned early that my achievements were background noise compared to Ethan's most basic accomplishments. When I made honor roll, my parents nodded approvingly. When Ethan passed a class with a C, they celebrated with a special dinner. My parents, Margaret and Robert Green, weren't bad people, at least that's what I told myself. They were hard-working middle-class Americans who somehow developed a massive blind spot when it came to their son. Dad worked as an insurance adjuster, and Mom taught third grade at the local elementary school. They preached responsibility and financial prudence values I internalized deeply. I started babysitting at 12, worked retail through high school, and put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs. By 27, I had saved nearly $68,000 toward my dream of opening my own graphic design studio. Ethan's path was dramatically different. 2 years older than me, he coasted through school on charm and occasional bursts of effort. My parents justified his mediocre grades. He's just not a book person, or he's street smart. While I worked summers, Ethan spent his playing video games or hanging with friends. When he dropped out of community college after one semester, my parents sighed, but quickly pivoted to college isn't for everyone. I remember one particular incident when I was 16. I'd saved $300 for a digital drawing tablet essential for my design ambitions. The night before I planned to buy it, Mom came to my room. "Charlotte, honey, Ethan needs money for his car insurance. He's a little short this month." "But Mom, I've been saving for months. Can't he get it from somewhere else?" Her expression hardened. "Family helps, family, Charlotte. He'd do the same for you." I surrendered my savings, knowing Ethan wouldn't have done the same. The pattern continued through my 20s, Ethan needing loans that were never repaid, my parents enabling him while praising me for being such a good sister. After college, I took a position at a marketing firm while freelancing on the side, building my portfolio and savings. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates, lived frugally, and tracked every dollar. Meanwhile, Ethan bounced between jobs, apartments, and relationships, leaving a trail of financial wreckage my parents quietly cleaned up. When I turned 25, I opened a separate savings account dedicated to Green Design Studio. Every extra dollar went there. I researched small business loans, commercial real estate, and equipment costs. I was 2 years away from my goal when Ethan's gambling addiction became impossible to ignore. It started small sports betting with friends, poker nights that stretched into mornings. My parents dismissed my concerns. All young men go through phases. But then came the credit card debt, the payday loans, and finally the desperate calls at midnight. Last Christmas, I overheard a heated conversation between my parents in the kitchen. Dad's voice was strained. "Robert, that's another $5,000 this month. Our retirement fund can't take much more." "What are we supposed to do, Margaret? Let him deal with these people alone. You know they've threatened him. Maybe he needs to face consequences for once." And maybe they break his legs. Is that what you want? I should have spoken up then. Should have confronted the situation head on. Instead, I retreated to my childhood bedroom telling myself it wasn't my problem. I had my own life, my own goals. Ethan was an adult 30 years old and still relying on our aging parents to rescue him. The situation came to a head 2 weeks ago. Mom called on a Tuesday evening, her voice unnaturally calm. "Charlotte, we need to have a family meeting. Can you come over for dinner tomorrow?" The knot in my stomach told me this wasn't about Dad's birthday or Mom's garden club. "What's wrong? Just come to dinner." 6 o'clock. When I arrived at my parents' house, Ethan's car was already in the driveway. Inside, the atmosphere was funeral-like. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed. Dad looked 10 years older than when I'd seen him last month. Ethan sat at the dining room table staring at his hands. After a silent dinner of Mom's lasagna, Dad cleared his throat. "We have a situation, and we need to discuss it as a family." I braced myself as he explained that Ethan had borrowed money from some dangerous people to cover gambling debts. The amount was staggering, $62,000. My parents had already liquidated most of their retirement savings, but they were still short. "Charlotte," Mom said, reaching for my hand across the table. "We know you've been saving for your business. But right now, Ethan's safety is what matters. Family comes first." The room spun around me. They weren't asking, they were telling me. 15 years of sacrifice, of staying in while friends traveled, of taking extra freelance projects instead of dating, of living with roommates well into my 20s, all of it was supposed to vanish for Ethan's mistakes. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "I'll pay you back, Char. I swear. I'm getting help this time. For real." I'd heard those promises before, we all had. "How much?" My voice sounded distant even to myself. Dad shifted uncomfortably. $30,000 would cover it. $30,000. Nearly half of everything I had worked for. Gone to bookies and loan sharks because my brother couldn't stop betting on football games and poker hands. "I need to think about this," I said, pushing back from the table. "There isn't time to think," Mom snapped, her facade of calm crumbling. "These people want their money by the end of the week." "That's not my problem," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "Ethan got himself into this. He's 30 years old. When does it end? When family stops being family." Dad's voice rose. "Is that what you want? To abandon your brother when he needs you most?" "I've never abandoned him," I said quietly. "But I won't abandon myself anymore either." I left that night with my parents' anger and disappointment following me out the door. What they didn't realize was that their ultimatum had finally broken something in me. Their perfect, responsible daughter had reached her limit. The drive home from my parents' house that night was a blur of streetlights and tears. Rain started falling halfway there, matching my mood perfectly. By the time I reached my apartment building, I was emotionally exhausted but oddly clear-headed. My roommate Zoe was curled up on our second-hand couch, scrolling through her phone. One look at my face and she put it down. "Family dinner didn't go well, huh?" I dropped onto the couch beside her and spilled everything. Ethan's gambling, my parents' demand, the implied threat of being cut off from the family if I didn't comply. Zoe's expression grew increasingly outraged. "They can't be serious. That's your money, Charlotte. Money you've worked your ass off for. They've always been like this with him," I said, staring at the ceiling. "But this time, I just can't do it. I can't keep enabling him." "So don't," Zoe said simply. "You don't owe them your future." That night I barely slept. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my mother. "We're so disappointed in your selfishness. Family helps family. Your brother could be in real danger." Around 3 a.m., Ethan called. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "Charlotte, please." His voice was slurred, probably drunk. "I know I messed up. I always mess up, but I'm scared, sis. These guys aren't playing around. I promise I'll change. I'll go to meetings. I'll get a real job. Please don't leave me hanging." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. How many times had I heard these promises? How many fresh starts had I witnessed only to watch him slide back into the same destructive patterns? Morning brought no clarity, just exhaustion and a growing sense of resentment. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years, and spent the day alternating between anger, guilt, and determination. By evening, my phone showed 15 missed calls, 8 from Mom, 5 from Dad, 2 from Ethan. I ignored them all and called the one person I knew would give me unfiltered advice. My grandmother, Martha, my father's mother, answered on the second ring. At 82, Grandma Martha still lived independently in her small house across town, gardened daily, and spoke her mind with refreshing bluntness. "Charlotte, what a lovely surprise, Grandma. I need advice." My voice cracked. I gave her the condensed version, half expecting her to side with my parents. Family loyalty ran deep in the Green bloodline. Instead, she was quiet for a long moment. "Your parents are making a terrible mistake," she finally said, her voice firm. "Robert and Margaret think they're helping Ethan, but they're destroying him and you in the process." Relief washed over me. "So you don't think I should give them the money?" "Absolutely not." Grandma Martha's tone left no room for argument. "That boy needs to face consequences, not another bailout. And you, my dear, deserve to see your dreams come true." Our conversation lasted nearly an hour. By the end, I was crying again, but these were different tears, cleansing rather than despairing. "Stand your ground, Grandma," Martha said before hanging up. "I'll talk to your father." The next day at work, I couldn't focus. My supervisor noticed my distraction and called me into her office. Melissa had been my boss for 3 years, and in that time she'd become something of a mentor. "Whatever's going on, Charlotte, it's affecting your work. Talk to me." To my horror, I burst into tears right there in her glass-walled office. Between sobs, I explained the situation. Melissa listened without interrupting, then pushed a box of tissues across her desk. "First, take a deep breath. Second, your family is being completely unreasonable." I know I hiccuped. "But they're still my family." "Yes," she agreed. "And sometimes loving your family means not giving them what they want but what they need. Your brother needs accountability, not another escape route." Melissa shared that her own sister had struggled with addiction. "We went through years of enabling her before we realized we were loving her to death. Tough love was the hardest thing we ever did, but it's the only reason she's 5 years sober today." That conversation was another turning point. If I truly loved Ethan, perhaps the kindest thing was to stop rescuing him. That evening, I drafted and deleted a dozen text messages to my parents, before finally sending "I love you all, but I won't be contributing to Ethan's debt. I'm sorry." The response was swift and brutal. Mom called immediately, her voice shrill with anger. "After everything we've done for you, your brother is in danger, Charlotte, real physical danger. How can you be so selfish?" "I'm not being selfish, Mom, I'm being realistic. Ethan needs help, not another bailout." "We are your family," she shouted. "Or at least we were. If this is your choice, then don't bother coming for Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or any family event, until you reconsider your priorities." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling. Being excluded from family gatherings was a serious threat in the Green household. Holidays were sacred, attendance mandatory. This wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was excommunication. Dad's text arrived minutes later: "Either you help your brother pay his debt, or don't bother coming home for Thanksgiving." I felt oddly calm reading it. The decision had been made for me. If helping Ethan meant sacrificing not just my savings, but my self-respect, the price was too high. That night I searched online for gambling addiction intervention, and found a certified counselor specializing in family systems and addiction. I booked an appointment for myself, not Ethan. I needed tools to navigate this new reality where I was the family villain for refusing to enable my brother's addiction. The next morning I walked into work with a new resolve. If my family was going to cut me off for prioritizing my financial health and Ethan's long-term recovery over a quick fix, then I would need to build a stronger support network elsewhere. More importantly, I would need to accelerate my business plans. Without family to fall back on, financial independence wasn't just a dream, it was a necessity. What I didn't know then was that my decision would set off a chain of events that would reveal just how deep the dysfunction in my family ran and ultimately lead to a reckoning none of us saw coming. 3 days after my parents' ultimatum, I received a call from an unfamiliar number during my lunch break. Stepping away from my desk, I answered cautiously, "Is this Charlotte Green?" The male voice was gruff, unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" "The name's Tony. I'm calling about your brother's situation." My blood ran cold. This was one of Ethan's creditors, the dangerous people my parents had warned about. "I don't have anything to do with my brother's debts," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's not what he told us. Said his sister was good for it. Even gave us your number as a contact." There was a pause. "Look, we don't want trouble, we just want our money." Anger surged through me, not at this Tony person but at Ethan. Without my knowledge or consent, he had dragged me into his mess, using me as collateral. "I'm sorry about my brother's situation," I said firmly. "But I'm not responsible for his debts. Please don't contact me again." I hung up and immediately called a lawyer friend from college. Rachel listened to my story and advised me to document everything. "If they call again, record it if legal in your state. Don't engage, just state clearly that you aren't responsible for the debt. If they make threats, call the police immediately." That evening, I changed my phone number, something I'd resisted doing despite years of Ethan's midnight crisis calls. I sent the new number only to my closest friends, my boss, and after hesitating, Grandma Martha. My parents and Ethan were conspicuously absent from the list. 2 days later, Grandma Martha called. "Your father came by yesterday," she said without preamble. "He's beside himself. Apparently, they've mortgaged the house to pay off part of Ethan's debt." I gasped. "The house? But they're only 10 years from paying it off." "I know." Robert was in tears, something I haven't seen since his father died. "Says they had no choice." Guilt twisted in my stomach. Had I driven them to this desperate measure by refusing to help? "Don't you dare blame yourself, Grandma," Martha said, reading my mind. "This is the consequence of years of enabling. If they'd established boundaries with Ethan years ago, none of this would be happening." After we hung up, I sat in my tiny bedroom, staring at the vision board above my desk. Photos of sleek office spaces, design equipment, and business cards bearing Green Design Studio were pinned alongside inspirational quotes. Years of dreams, so close to reality. Was I really going to let them go? No, I wouldn't. But I also couldn't ignore my family's desperate situation. The next morning, I visited 3 banks, before finding one where I could open a new account with no connection to my existing bank. I transferred half my savings, $34,000, to this new account. The remaining money, I decided, would be my final contribution to the Ethan Green Disaster Relief Fund. Not all of it, but enough to help without destroying my future. I didn't call or text my parents. Instead, I drove to their house after work. Mom opened the door, her expression shifting from surprise to cold anger. "What do you want?" "To talk about Ethan's situation." She let me in reluctantly. Dad was in his recliner, looking haggard and aged. Neither of them offered me a seat, so I remained standing. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began carefully. "About family coming first." Hope flickered in my mother's eyes. "So you'll help? I'll contribute $30,000, I said. "It's not everything I have, but it's what I can afford to give." Rather than gratitude, my mother's expression hardened. "That's not enough, Charlotte. We're still short." The audacity stunned me. "It's $30,000 more than you had 5 minutes ago, Mom." My father finally spoke. We need at least $50,000 from you, Charlotte. The house money covered some but not all. 50,000, I echoed. That's almost everything I have. And what good is opening some little design business if your brother is hurt or worse, Mom snapped. Where are your priorities? In that moment, something crystallized for me. This wasn't about Ethan's safety or family loyalty. It was about control. Control they'd exercised over me my entire life while letting Ethan run wild. My priority, I said slowly, is breaking this toxic cycle. I'm offering $30,000, which by the way represents hundreds of nights and weekends I worked while Ethan was out gambling. Take it or leave it. Dad stood up. We're your parents, Charlotte. You don't dictate terms to us. I'm 27 years old. I absolutely get to dictate terms about my own money. I pulled out my checkbook. This is a one-time offer. And it comes with conditions. Conditions, Mom scoffed. Yes. Ethan gets professional help, real help, not just promises. He attends Gamblers Anonymous. He gets a steady job. And if he ever gambles again, you don't bail him out. Any of you. You can't control what we do with our money, Dad said. No, but I can control what I do with mine. These are my terms. After 30 minutes of arguing, they grudgingly accepted. I wrote the check feeling sick but also strangely empowered. For the first time, I was setting boundaries with my family. As I was leaving, Mom called after me. I suppose you'll still want to come for Thanksgiving now. The pettiness of the question after what I'd just sacrificed left me speechless. I didn't answer, just walked to my car. Driving away, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'd just given away $30,000, money that represented years of sacrifice. And my mother's primary concern was whether I still expected a place at the holiday table. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same between us again. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. What I didn't realize was that my act of rebellion was just the beginning. The secret account I'd opened my insurance policy against financial ruin would soon become central to a plan I hadn't even conceived yet. A plan that would ultimately reveal the true extent of my family's betrayal and lead to a reckoning none of us expected. The week after I gave my parents the check was one of the loneliest of my life. My phone remained silent, no calls from Mom checking in on my day, no texts from Dad sharing bad jokes he'd heard at work. Even Ethan, who should have been overwhelmed with gratitude, hadn't reached out. The silence spoke volumes about what I'd always suspected: my value to my family was directly proportional to my usefulness. I threw myself into work, taking on extra freelance projects to rebuild my depleted savings. My dream of opening Green Design Studio by 30 now seemed like a distant fantasy pushed years into the future by my family's crisis. On Friday evening, exhausted from a week of 12-hour workdays, I was startled by a knock at my apartment door. Zoe was out on a date, so I cautiously checked the peephole. Grandma Martha stood in the hallway, clutching her oversized purse and looking determined. "Grandma, is everything okay?" I asked, ushering her inside. "No, everything is not okay," she said, settling onto my couch with surprising agility for her age, "but I'm here to fix that." She opened her purse and pulled out an envelope, pushing it across the coffee table toward me. "Open it." Inside was a check made out to me for $50,000. I gasped. "Grandma, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not a gift, Charlotte. It's an investment." Her eyes, so like my father's, but sharper, more discerning, held mine steadily. "In you. In your business. The business my son and his wife just forced you to delay." "But this is your retirement money." "It's my money to do with as I please," she interrupted. "And I please to invest it in the only member of this family with any financial sense." Tears welled in my eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it and open that design studio you've been planning for years. Say you'll stop letting them hold you back." She reached for my hand. I've watched for years as Margaret and Robert enabled Ethan while expecting you to be the responsible one. It stops now. I hugged her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of lavender and peppermint that had always meant safety to me. Thank you. Not just for this, but for seeing me. Grandma Martha stayed for dinner. Over takeout Chinese, she revealed something that changed everything. There's something you should know about your grandfather's will, she said, carefully picking up a piece of broccoli with her chopsticks. When Franklin died, he left specific instructions about his estate. The house went to me, of course, and a modest trust was set up for your father. But the bulk of the inheritance, about $200,000, was put in a separate trust for both you and Ethan, to be divided equally when you each turned 30. I nearly choked on my lo mein. What, Dad never mentioned any trust? Grandma Martha's expression darkened. That's because Robert convinced me to release Ethan's half early when he was 24. Said Ethan wanted to start a business. Let me guess, the business never materialized. Oh, it existed on paper, some kind of sports memorabilia shop that conveniently failed within a year. I always suspected it was a front to cover gambling debts even then. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. And my half of the inheritance is still in trust, growing nicely. You'll get it on your 30th birthday, a little over 2 years from now. She paused. I made sure of that after seeing what happened to Ethan's portion. Robert was furious when I refused to release your funds early too. The revelation stunned me. All these years I'd been scrimping and saving, unaware that a substantial inheritance awaited me, an inheritance my parents had never mentioned. Why wouldn't they tell me about this? I whispered. Control, Grandma, Martha said simply. As long as you believed you were completely on your own financially, you'd stay in line. You'd keep being the responsible one who bails out her brother. The betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore, it was about years of manipulation and hidden truths. There's more, Grandma, Martha continued. I've been doing some digging since our last conversation. Did you know your parents refinanced their house last year? Before this current crisis, I shook my head. They pulled out $120, 0 inches equity. When I asked Robert about it, he was evasive. Said something about home improvements, but Charlotte, have you seen any major renovations at their house lately? I hadn't. The house looked the same as always, comfortable, but showing its age. So where did that money go? I asked already, guessing the answer. I suspect to Ethan's creditors. This isn't the first gambling crisis, just the largest. I sat back, mind racing. If my parents had already accessed $120,000 from their home equity before the current crisis, plus my $30,000, plus whatever else they'd liquidated from their retirement account, how much does Ethan really owe? I wondered aloud. Grandma Martha's expression was grim. More than anyone's telling you, I'd wager. That night after Grandma left, I couldn't sleep. The revelation about the trust fund, the mysterious home refinancing, the mounting suspicion that I'd been manipulated for years, it all swirled in my mind, creating a perfect storm of anger and determination. Around 2 a.m., I got up and opened my laptop. With newfound purpose, I created a spreadsheet tracking every loan I could remember giving Ethan over the years, every gift my parents had pressured me to contribute, to every sacrifice I'd made for the family, while Ethan continued his consequence-free existence. The total was staggering. Conservative estimates put it at over $45,000, not including the recent $30,000. That was money I'd never see again, opportunities lost, experiences foregone. But the financial tally paled in comparison to the emotional cost, the constant anxiety about money, the guilt trips, the obligation to be the family safety net while pursuing my own dreams on a shoestring budget. I was done. Done being the family ATM. Done enabling Ethan's addiction under the guise of family loyalty. Done letting my parents manipulate me with selective truths. The next morning, I called the business consultant I'd been sporadically meeting with for the past year. Jessica had helped me develop my business plan for Green Design Studio, always assuming I was working with limited personal capital. I need to accelerate the timeline, I told her. I have more capital than expected. How quickly can we move? Jessica was surprised but adaptable. With additional funding, we could potentially have you operational in 3 to 4 months. But Charlotte, are you sure? Last time we spoke, you were planning to wait another year to build more client connections. I'm sure, I said firmly. Things have changed. I need this business to succeed, now more than ever. Over the weekend, Jessica and I revised the business plan. With Grandma Martha's investment and my remaining savings, I had enough for a modest studio space, essential equipment, and 6 months of operating expenses. It was risky. Launching sooner meant less runway if things went south, but also liberating. On Monday, I gave notice at my marketing job. My boss Melissa was disappointed but supportive. You're one of our best designers, Charlotte. But I've always known you were destined for bigger things. She offered me a part-time consulting contract to ease the transition, stable income while I built my client base. The gesture brought tears to my eyes. You've taught me so much, I told her. Not just about design, but about standing up for myself. You've always had it in you, she replied. You just needed permission to put yourself first occasionally. By Wednesday, I had scheduled viewings of 3 potential studio spaces. By Friday, I'd signed a lease on a small but well-located office in an up-and-coming area of the city. The rent was reasonable, the space needed minimal renovation, and several neighboring businesses were potential clients. The speed at which my life was transforming was dizzying. After years of careful planning and cautious saving, I was suddenly all action. Part of me wondered if I was making rash decisions, driven by emotional reaction to my family's betrayal. But a stronger voice insisted this acceleration was long overdue. I hadn't heard from my parents since the check handover. Their silence felt like confirmation of my suspicions. My value was transactional. Having served my purpose by contributing to Ethan's bailout, I was now irrelevant until the next crisis. As I was arranging delivery of office furniture to my new space, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Charlotte, it's Ben. Ethan's sponsor. I hadn't known Ethan had a sponsor. Apparently, my brother was actually attending Gamblers Anonymous as required by my bailout terms. He asked me to call you, Ben continued. Part of his recovery is making amends, but he wasn't sure you'd take his call. He was right about that, I said more bitterly than intended. I understand. But would you consider meeting with him with me present as a mediator? I think there are things you need to hear, and Ethan is finally ready to be honest. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to close the door on the family drama, and focus entirely on my new beginning. But another part recognized that, without some resolution, the resentment would continue to eat at me. When and where, I finally asked. Tomorrow 2 p.m. at the community center downtown, room 104. I'll be there, I agreed, not quite sure if I was making a mistake. That night I sat in my half-packed apartment surrounded by boxes labeled studio and feeling strangely calm. Whatever happened tomorrow with Ethan, I had already changed the trajectory of my life. I had seized control from those who had manipulated me for years. I had allies, Grandma, Martha, Melissa, Zoe, Jessica, who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply without anxiety, dreams about money or family obligation. Whatever revelations tomorrow brought, I was finally standing on solid ground of my own making. Listen guys, I know this story has been a roller coaster so far, and I can't thank you enough for coming along on this journey with me. If you're feeling that frustration toward my family right now, believe me, I felt it too. But before we get to what happened at that meeting with Ethan and his sponsor, I'd love to know if you've ever had to make a tough choice between your dreams and family obligations. Drop a comment below. And if you're enjoying this story of standing up for yourself when family loyalty gets twisted, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. Subscribe to see more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding your own path. Now let's find out what bombshell Ethan was about to drop. The community center was busy when I arrived, people coming and going from various support groups and community meetings. I found room 104, easily enough, a small meeting room with uncomfortable-looking chairs arranged in a circle. Only 2 people were inside, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair who I assumed was Ben and my brother. Ethan looked terrible. His normally styled hair was unwashed, his designer clothes replaced by a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't projecting the image of effortless success. He'd cultivated the image our parents had helped maintain despite mounting evidence of his dysfunction. "Charlotte," he said, standing awkwardly as I entered. "Thank you for coming." Ben introduced himself with a firm handshake. "I appreciate you being open to this conversation." Ethan has been working hard on his 4th and 5th steps, taking a moral inventory and admitting his wrongs. "I'm listening," I said, taking a seat across from them. Ethan cleared his throat. "I don't even know where to start, Char. I've been awful to you. For years." "Yes, you have," I agreed, not making this easier for him. "The money you gave it helped, but it wasn't enough." He looked down. "The debt was bigger than what Mom and Dad told you." "How much bigger?" Ethan winced. "Almost double. Around $110. 000. The number hit me like a physical blow. "Jesus, Ethan. I know. It got out of control. Sports betting led to online poker, then casino games. I'd win big occasionally, which kept me going. Convinced me I could fix everything with one good streak." He shook his head. Classic addict thinking. "So what happened after I gave them the $30? 000. Did Mom and Dad cover the rest?" Ethan exchanged a look with Ben before continuing. "They tried. They drained their retirement accounts. But it still wasn't enough." A horrible suspicion formed in my mind. "Ethan, please tell me you didn't go to loan sharks again." "No," he said quickly. "No, I went to Grandma Martha." My blood ran cold. What I was desperate, Charlotte. These guys were threatening me, threatening Mom and Dad. I went to Grandma's house and told her everything, begged her for help, and I prompted, my voice tight. "She refused," Ethan said quietly. "Said she wouldn't enable me anymore. That she'd already seen what happened with my trust fund money." I stared at him, processing this information. "She told me about that. The inheritance from Grandpa that Dad never mentioned to me." Ethan looked surprised. "You didn't know Dad released my portion when I was 24, said it was my right to use it how I wanted, and you gambled it away," I said flatly. He nodded, shame evident in his hunched shoulders. "All of it." Within 8 months, the pieces were falling into place. "So, after Grandma refused, what happened?" Ethan took a deep breath. "That's why I needed to talk to you. There's something you don't know, Charlotte. Something bad." Ben placed a supportive hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Remember, complete honesty is the only path forward." "After Grandma refused," Ethan continued, "I was desperate. The deadline was approaching. These guys don't mess around with extensions." He paused, visibly struggling. "So Dad did something stupid." "What did he do?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "He forged your signature." The words hung in the air between us. What? The trust fund, your half. He tried to access it early by forging your signature on the release documents. Said it was an emergency family situation. I felt physically ill. My own father had attempted to steal my inheritance money I hadn't even known existed until recently. "It didn't work," Ethan continued quickly. "Grandma caught it. She's the co-trustee, and she recognized the forgery immediately. She confronted Dad, and it got ugly. Really ugly." "When was this?" I demanded. "Last week." Right after you gave them the 30,000. My mind raced. No wonder I hadn't heard from my parents. They weren't ignoring me because I'd fulfilled my usefulness. They were avoiding me because they'd tried to steal from me and been caught. Does Mom know what Dad did? Ethan nodded miserably. She was in on it. Grandma confronted them both. The betrayal was complete. My own parents, who had raised me to value honesty, responsibility, and hard work, had attempted to steal my inheritance rather than force Ethan to face consequences. There's more, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. About the debt itself. What about it? It wasn't all gambling. Some was, but... He looked to Ben again, who nodded encouragingly. I've been using cocaine. Heavily. For about 3 years now. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. Ethan's erratic behavior, financial chaos, and mysterious disappearances suddenly made more sense. Does addiction run in families? I asked Ben directly. There can be genetic components, he answered carefully. But environment plays a huge role too. Enablers can be as destructive as dealers. The implication was clear: our parents had created the perfect environment for Ethan's addictions to flourish. So what happens now? I asked, feeling emotionally drained. I'm going to inpatient rehab, Ethan said. 30 days minimum, maybe longer. Grandma Martha is paying for it on the condition that I stick with the program and get a job afterward. A real job, not another startup that's really just a way to launder money for drugs and gambling. I nodded, surprised and relieved that he was finally getting serious help. That's good, Ethan. I hope it works this time. Me too. He looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. I owe you so much more than money, Charlotte. I've taken advantage of you for years. Stolen your childhood, your financial security, your relationship with our parents. Yes, you have, I acknowledged. There was no point denying it. I can't change the past. But I'm working the program now, one day at a time. And part of that is making amends where possible. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is a promissory note. I know it's just paper right now, but it acknowledges that I owe you $75,000, the 30 you just gave, plus what I estimate I've borrowed over the years. I took the paper, surprised by the gesture. I've also written out a full confession about what Mom and Dad did with the trust fund, Ethan continued. Grandma has a copy too. If they ever try to manipulate you again, you have leverage. The meeting lasted another hour. Ethan answered all my questions honestly, confirming my worst suspicions about our parents enabling and revealing new depths to their deception. They had covered for him through job losses, a DUI that was mysteriously reduced to a minor traffic violation thanks to Dad's golf buddy, a local judge, and countless loans that depleted their retirement savings long before this latest crisis. As we were leaving, Ethan awkwardly asked for a hug. I hesitated, then complied stiffly. Whatever breakthroughs he was having in recovery, my trust had been too thoroughly shattered for instant reconciliation. Good luck in rehab, I said sincerely. I hope it helps. Thanks for coming today, he replied. And Charlotte, I really am proud of you. For the design studio, for standing up to all of us. You deserve every success. It was perhaps the first genuine compliment he'd given me in our adult lives. Driving home, I felt lighter somehow. The revelations had been painful, but the fog of manipulation was lifting. I saw my family clearly now, not as the loving unit I'd imagined, but as deeply flawed individuals whose dysfunctions had shaped my entire life. More importantly, I saw my path forward. Green Design Studio would open in 2 months. My future would be built on my terms, free from the obligation to rescue those who refused to rescue themselves. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly karma would come for my parents, or how public their downfall would be. The following Monday morning, I was at my new studio space overseeing the delivery of design equipment when my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Call me now. Your dad is all over the local news. Heart racing, I stepped outside to call her. "What's happening?" I demanded as soon as she picked up. "Your father's been arrested, Charlotte. It's on every local channel." Something about fraud and embezzlement at his insurance company. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. Embezzlement. That doesn't make sense. Dad's been with Alliance Insurance for 20 years, he's a senior adjuster. Well, according to the news, he's been falsifying claims and pocketing the money for at least 3 years. They're saying it could be over $200,000. The amount matched what Ethan had blown through with his gambling and drug habits almost exactly. This wasn't coincidence. "I need to see this," I said, ending the call and immediately searching for news on my phone. The story was indeed everywhere. Robert Green, 58, longtime employee of Alliance Insurance, arrested on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying business records. His face, my father's face, appeared in a mugshot that had already gone viral locally. In it, he looked shell-shocked and much older than his years. I called Grandma Martha next. "I just heard," I said when she answered. "Did you know about this?" "Not until this morning," she replied, her voice tight with emotion. "The police came to their house at dawn. Your mother called me hysterical after they took him away." Is this connected to Ethan's debts? Was Dad stealing to cover them? Almost certainly, Grandma Martha sighed heavily. But there's more. The police search turned up cocaine in their house, quite a significant amount. Your mother is claiming ignorance, saying it must be Ethan's, but they're investigating her as well. The situation was worse than I could have imagined. My respectable middle-class parents were now entangled in fraud, embezzlement, and potential drug charges. The carefully maintained facade of the Green family was crumbling publicly and spectacularly. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt numb, then unexpectedly sad. Not for my parents or their predicament, they had made their choices repeatedly, but for the family we could have been if addiction and enablement hadn't twisted us into something unrecognizable. "What happens now?" I asked Grandma Martha. "Your father will be arraigned today. Bail will be set if it's granted at all. White-collar crime with this dollar amount. It won't be cheap. And Mom, she hasn't been charged yet, but she's a person of interest. The police are particularly interested in how cocaine worth approximately $15,000 ended up in her sewing room." I nearly dropped my phone. Her sewing room, not Ethan's old bedroom or the basement. Apparently it was hidden inside her fabric bins. Hard to claim ignorance of that. The implications were staggering. Had my mother been involved in Ethan's drug use? Or worse, had she been dealing to support his habits? The woman who had taught Sunday school and baked cookies for my class parties. Later that day, the news broke that Alliance Insurance was conducting an internal audit of all claims handled by my father over the past 5 years. Early findings suggested a pattern of falsified water damage claims on homes that had never experienced flooding, wind damage reports on days with clear weather, and inflated repair estimates that generated larger payouts, a portion of which disappeared before reaching the supposed claimants. Dad's colleague of 15 years, Thomas Whitaker, was quoted, saying he was shocked and devastated by the revelations. Robert was the last person I would have suspected of anything like this. He was always talking about integrity in our business. The irony was almost too much to bear. My father, who had lectured me endlessly about financial responsibility, had been systematically defrauding his employer to fund his son's addictions. By evening, my phone was blowing up with texts and calls from extended family, old friends, even college acquaintances who had recognized my last name in the news. I ignored most, responding only to those closest to me, with a brief acknowledgement that yes, it was my father, and no, I had no additional information. Wednesday brought a new development. Mom called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Charlotte, are you there?" Her voice was thin, frightened. "I'm here. I need help," she said, no preamble, no "how are you?" Your father's bail is set at $250,000. We need to post a bond. They've frozen our accounts as part of the investigation. I laughed, the sound harsh, even to my own ears. You can't be serious. This is no time for attitude, Charlotte. Your father is in jail, where he belongs apparently. He stole over $200. Mom. Tried to steal my inheritance too. Why would I help him? Because we're family, she nearly shrieked. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Lied to me about my inheritance, enabled Ethan's addictions, prioritized him at every turn, while expecting me to clean up his messes. Or maybe you mean attempting to steal from me when I refused to give you my life savings. Silence. Then, in a quieter voice, you don't understand the pressure we've been under. The threats. We were trying to protect our family. No, you were protecting Ethan from consequences while sacrificing me in the process. And now Dad might go to prison for it. Charlotte, please. If you ever loved us at all, don't. I cut her off. Don't use emotional manipulation on me anymore. It doesn't work. Dad made his choices. So did you. So did Ethan. Now you all get to live with the consequences, just like I've had to live with the consequences of your collective dysfunction my entire life. So that's it, you're abandoning us when we need you most. Her voice cracked. I'm choosing not to enable criminal behavior. I learned that from Ethan's recovery program. You should look into it. After hanging up, I sat in my new office space, surrounded by half-unpacked equipment, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not for long, 10 minutes at most, but I cried for the family I had wanted, for the support I had craved, for the unconditional love that had always been conditional. Then I wiped my eyes, called my first potential client, to confirm our meeting for the following day, and returned to unpacking. Life was moving forward with or without the Green family drama. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Green Design Studio took shape both physically and as a business entity. I secured 3 clients in the first month, small projects but with growth potential. Melissa's consulting contract provided steady income while I built my client base. My new website launched, featuring a portfolio of my best work. Meanwhile, my parents' situation deteriorated. Dad was indicted on 27 counts of fraud and embezzlement. The evidence was overwhelming. He had been systematically creating and approving false claims for years, directing portions of the payouts to various accounts under his control. These funds had then been used primarily to cover Ethan's gambling losses and drug purchases. Mom was charged as an accessory, plus possession with intent to distribute cocaine. The prosecution's theory, based on evidence found in their home and electronic communications, was that she had been selling drugs within her social circle, primarily to other middle-aged women, to generate additional income to support Ethan. The community was scandalized. The Greens had been fixtures in local society, not wealthy but respectable, involved in church and school functions. Now they were revealed as criminals who had maintained their middle-class lifestyle while funding their sons' addictions through increasingly desperate and illegal means. Throughout this public implosion, I maintained my distance. Grandma Martha kept me informed of developments, but I attended neither court appearances nor family crisis meetings. I had removed myself from the toxic system, and with each passing day of independence, my resolve strengthened. Ethan, meanwhile, was completing his rehabilitation program. According to Grandma Martha, he was doing well, attending meetings daily, working with his sponsor, and even securing a job at a local printing company that would start after his release. The owner was a recovered alcoholic who believed in second chances. 6 weeks after my father's arrest, I received a letter from him handwritten on the distinctive stationery of the county detention center. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity again prevailed. Dear Charlotte, it began. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. What I've done is unforgivable, not just the crimes I'm charged with, but the greater crime of failing you as a father. The letter continued for 3 pages. Unlike my mother's desperate phone call, it contained no requests for money or help, just a painful accounting of his failures and the twisted logic that had led him to criminal behavior. I told myself I was protecting my family, he wrote. In reality, I was protecting Ethan from consequences, Margaret from truth, and myself from the admission that I had failed as a parent. The only person I wasn't protecting was you, the only one who never needed protection, who showed more strength and integrity than the rest of us combined. He ended with a simple acknowledgement: you were right to cut ties with us. Continue building your life on your terms. I hope someday to hear of your success from afar. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Not discarded, but not responded to either. Perhaps someday I would find the words to reply. For now, silence was its own answer. 2 months after opening, Green Design Studio landed its first major client, a regional brewery needing complete rebranding. The project fee would cover my operating expenses for 3 months. The client had found me through one of the small business owners in my building, word of mouth marketing at its finest. As I worked late one evening on concept designs for the brewery project, my phone rang. Grandma Martha. Charlotte, dear. I wanted you to hear this from me first. Your parents have both accepted plea deals. I set down my stylus. What kind of deals? Your father will serve 4 years in a minimum security facility, plus restitution. Your mother gets 18 months, mostly because the prosecution's drug case wasn't as strong as they initially thought. I processed this information silently. Also, Grandma, Martha continued, Ethan completed rehab yesterday, 90 days clean. He's starting his job next week and moving into a halfway house. That's good. I hope it sticks this time. Me too, dear. He asks about you often. Wants to know how the studio is going. I wasn't ready to reconnect with Ethan yet, despite his apparent progress. You can tell him it's going well. I will. She paused. One more thing. Remember the promissory note he gave you? He's set up automatic payments from his new job. It's only $50 a week to start, but he insisted on beginning repayment immediately. The gesture surprised me. $50 a week would take decades to repay the full amount, but the symbolism wasn't lost on me. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Ethan was taking responsibility for his actions. Good for him, I said, meaning it. As I hung up, I gazed around my studio, my space created on my terms. The path here had been painful, littered with betrayals and revelations I never wanted. But standing amid the wreckage of my family's choices, I had found my own strength and built something that was entirely mine. My parents would serve their time. Ethan would continue his recovery one day at a time. And I would move forward, neither defined by their actions nor responsible for their redemption. The Green family as I had known it was gone, shattered by addiction enabling and the inevitable consequences of decades of dysfunction. But from those fragments, something new was emerging, a future based on truth rather than manipulation, on boundaries rather than obligation. It wasn't the happy ending I had once imagined. It was something more complex, more honest, and ultimately more satisfying, a beginning entirely of my own making. 2 years have passed since my parents entered the correctional system, and my brother started his recovery journey. Green Design Studio has flourished beyond my early projections, expanding to a staff of 3 and a client list that includes 2 national brands. Last month I purchased my first home, a small but charming house with a converted garage that serves as my home office. My father writes monthly from prison. His letters have evolved from apologies to updates on his life inside the GED courses he teaches, the financial literacy program he's developed for fellow inmates. I respond occasionally, our correspondence careful but no longer hostile. My mother, released 8 months ago, lives with my aunt in Florida. Our relationship remains strained, but we've spoken twice by phone. She's working part-time at a fabric store and attending therapy. Small steps toward whatever our future relationship might become. Ethan has maintained his sobriety for 26 months. He still makes his weekly payments toward his debt to me, now up to $150, as his printing job evolved into a management position. We meet for coffee every other month, our conversations increasingly honest. He's not the same person who gambled away his inheritance and manipulated our parents into criminal behavior, just as I'm not the same person who allowed herself to be manipulated for decades. Grandma Martha, now 84, still gardens daily and offers unfiltered advice. She invested in my second round of business expansion and beams with pride at every milestone. As for me, I've learned that family isn't always who you're born to, sometimes it's who you choose. My circle now includes Zoe, Melissa, Jessica, clients who became friends, fellow business owners in my building, and yes, cautiously, the remaining Greens. The inheritance my father tried to steal was released on my 30th birthday as planned. I used part of it to establish a scholarship for business students from backgrounds affected by addiction, my small contribution toward breaking cycles of dysfunction. Life isn't perfect. I still wake sometimes from dreams where I'm desperately trying to save my family while they pull me under. But those nights are increasingly rare. What I know now is this: sometimes the most loving act is refusing to participate in someone else's self-destruction. Sometimes the strongest family bonds are forged through crisis and reconstruction rather than blind loyalty. And sometimes the path to wholeness requires walking away from those who would sacrifice you for their comfort. This isn't the end of my story, it's the beginning of the one I'm writing for myself. One where boundaries are respected, truth is valued, and my worth isn't measured by my usefulness to others. Thank you for coming along on this journey with me. If any part of my story resonated with you, know that you're not alone. Standing your ground when family loyalty gets twisted isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. Have you ever experienced family dynamics where loyalty was used against you? Drop a comment below and share your story. This community has become a place where so many of us have found understanding. If this video helped you feel less alone in your family struggles, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated relationships and finding your own path. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share this video with them. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into. Thank you all for your support, and I'll see you in the next video.